Today, we celebrate the 19th Amendment. It bears repeating that while the 19th Amendment gave all American women the constitutional right to vote in 1920, not all women could vote. Black women in the South had to put up with racist Jim Crow laws for another 45 years. Native Americans didn't have full access to voting until 1962 and were stopped from voting with poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation, the same tactics used against black voters. A long campaign and many laws were required to fully open ballot access to others, including another constitutional amendment, the 24th, and finally the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So as you've heard, the 19th Amendment was but one step in a long battle for the right to vote. It seemed secure a few decades ago, but it's under attack again today. For the 50 years between 1920 and 1970, elected women were a rarity. Let me mention just a few of the firsts. In 1924, Nellie Ross of Wyoming was elected the first woman governor in the United States. 1928, Minnie Buckingham Harper of West Virginia was the first black woman in a state legislature. In 1930, for the first time, New Mexico elected 2 Latina state legislators. In 1968, Shirley Chisholm was the first black woman elected to the U.S. House and the first to seek the nomination for president of the United States from one of the 2 major political parties. In 1992, the first woman of color elected to the Senate was Carol Mosley Braun of Illinois. It wasn't until 2012 that the first woman of color elected to both chambers in the federal government. Her name is Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. She was elected to the House in 2007 and the Senate in 2012. And in 2017, the first Latina woman, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, was elected. I have to mention a few of the elected women who inspired me. When I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, the most common way a woman held a national or state office was when her husband died and she was appointed to fill the remainder of his term. Except in 1948, Margaret Chase Smith became the first woman elected to the Senate without having been appointed. She was one of the first senators to denounce Joseph McCarthy. She also made a brief effort to become the Republican presidential candidate in 1964. As a teenager in 1964, I was in awe that she insisted on using both her birth name and her married name. In 1984, Geraldine Ferraro, teacher, lawyer, United States Representative from 1979 to 1985, and the first woman vice presidential nominee by a major political party. I was ecstatic. An Italian woman, just like my mother, my 7 aunts, and my immigrant grandmother. And my absolute favorite elected woman, Barbara Jordan. She was a lawyer, an educator, and a congresswoman from 1972 to 1978. She was the first African American congresswoman to come from the Deep South and the first woman ever elected to the Texas Senate in 1966. She became nationally known for her expertise on constitutional law during the Watergate hearings. She gave the keynote speeches at the Democratic National Convention in 1976 and in 1992. The numbers of women in elected state and federal offices stayed at around 3 to 6% throughout the 1970s and the 1980s. And then something happened in 1992. I'm not sure what, but I like to think that maybe women finally got tired of having men run the government. The numbers changed. Percentages of women in federal elected office jumped to 10%, in state elective office to 22%. And the percentage increased every year until now. Right now, in the U.S. Congress, There are 127 women, 23%. 26 women serve in the Senate and 101 in the House. The number of women of color elected to Congress reached an historic high of 43, and at least 3 women elected identify as LGBTQ. Women hold 28% of state executive offices, and the proportion of women in state legislatures is now 29%. In the 100 largest cities in the United States, 27 have women mayors. 7 are black women, and 2 are Asian Pacific Islander women. In the Illinois legislature, there are 44 women, or 29%, including the 2 that represent McDonough County. In the McDonough County Courthouse, 2 of our judges, 4 of our county board members are women, and the county assessor, circuit clerk, county clerk, and treasurer are all women. Based on my personal experience in the courthouse, McDonough County wouldn't be working without those women. And in Macomb, and in the city of Macomb, both the township assessor and supervisor and the city clerk and 3 of the 7 members of the city council are women, and that is 42%. But the fight for the vote is not over. Voter suppression rises as the number of voters rise. Voter suppression disproportionately affects people of color, young people, and people with disabilities. And messing with the post office will make it harder for everyone to vote. I'm asking, will you continue the fight so that all of us can vote freely and safely? I can't hear you, and if I can't hear you, they won't hear you in City Hall, in Springfield, or Washington. Will you continue the fight? Finally, just as the fight for the right to vote didn't end in 1920, the fight for equality isn't over. Women are 51% of the world's population, but the work of women is underpaid, overlooked, and often forgotten. I'm asking again, will you keep facing the storm, whatever it is? Will you all continue to write women into history? Thank you.